Hello, hello. How we doing? It's Greg here, Fisherman's headquarters. Just logging on for this evening. Going to talk to you guys a little bit about a few things. I won't get into anything too quick. Let a few people jump on here. I appreciate everybody for joining on. Last year I did a bunch of Instagram lives, and this year I was kind of out of the loop and pretty busy the last few months here. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the spring weather. I'm not sure how many people are local to Long Beach Island or maybe out of town from our local area from the shop, but I appreciate you joining on. Hopefully I can provide some content that will help you out. So a couple things I want to talk about were striped bass and wind. Got a couple messages. People were thinking that I was possibly going to talk about the striped bass fishing in the wind, but that's actually not the case. So I want to talk about a little striped bass and a little bit about wind turbines. I'm not sure if you've kind of been following along with what's going on, but there is some action taking place at the federal and state level with regards to, I'll just call it what it is, industrialization of our oceans. Long story short is there are two large projects taking place in New Jersey. I'll just dive right into it. Atlantic Shores is one of them, and Ocean Wind is another. If you're not familiar with it, I strongly suggest you checking it out, learning a little bit about what's going on. It's not just happening here in New Jersey, it's happening all over the place. When I say all over the place, all over the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, basically North Carolina, all the way up the coast, up to Maine. There are some groups that you might think would be aligned with it, and there's some groups that you might think that would not be aligned with it. And some of these groups would actually really surprise you. They surprise me when I find out who supports it and who doesn't. There's some, I'll just say, environmental groups that are extreme, and you, of course, extreme environmental groups. You would assume that they would support extreme measures. When I say extreme measures, New Jersey, the governor is talking by 2050, 100% renewable. So, I'm all for getting rid of coal. I was stoked to see that right here down the road they shut down BL England here a few years back, which is a coal facility that was basically inland from Ocean City. They shut down one of the oldest nuclear facilities that was in the country, Oyster Creek Power Plant, which was a great fishing spot, but it had to go. And now it seems like they're shifting gears over to wind here in New Jersey. I've been attending a lot of meetings, been paying attention to a lot of things, been doing a lot of reading. I don't want to dive too much into the nitty gritty. I just really encourage that everybody who's watching, which is 71 right now, if you think it may affect you, definitely look into it, see what you can learn, see what you can read, and figure out what's happening. Anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm glad to share what I know. It's a lot to learn at once. It's taken me years to kind of follow along and keep track of what's happening. I know it's happening all over the East Coast here. I know it's happening on the West Coast. I am all for protecting the environment. I'm all for getting away from, say, fossil fuels and the greenhouse gases. I understand climate change is real. Just the one thing I don't really agree with, just to throw it out there, is hundreds of turbines being put just a few miles from, I'll say, our shores, right here in Long Beach Island, the Central Jersey coast, the Jersey Shore, Brigantine, Atlantic City, Ocean City, Wildwood, very, very close to these shores. It's not just the visual pollution. We're going to lose that view shed. We're going to lose that, beautiful driving out to the horizon in the early mornings, heading out to the canyon or just heading out to the reefs to go fish and just saying, hey, it's a beautiful sunrise and, oh, great, here's a couple hundred turbines. A couple things that don't sit well with me is just how it's going to radically change the bottom from what we have here in New Jersey is a soft, sandy bottom. It's a very unique habitat, and it's going to change over to a very, very much more hard bottom. Some small pebbles, they call it rock, but it's more like a stone pebble-like scour protection. I think they're kind of spoon feeding some of the recreational anglers, which I kind of fell into that, I'll say, bucket. When I first heard about this, I thought, this is going to be great. It's going to help out, it's going to build us wrecks and reefs. The local Charter Boat Fishing Association, Beach Haven Charter Fishing Association, and the Junior Mates program took it upon themselves to raise some money to build some reefs, or I should say, put new pieces out on the reefs. They got two tugs. I think it cost them 50 to 75 grand. It might have been more than that, to go get a piece of material which is a ship, an old ship, get it cleaned and get it put out there. Building stuff out there is very difficult. We all know that it's very important to have reefs. We see these. To me, a rock, say pile, and building, let's say, tires or tanks, train cars, all these recycled things they put out there, concrete, or old ships, have their place. They create habitat. I think nobody's going to disagree with that. But to me, trying to say that same thing, the benefits of that reef effect, how it creates habitat, I don't think you can just extrapolate it across and say that putting hundreds of turbines in a sandy bottom are going to be a good thing. And the reason why I say that is this isn't a permanent, we put out a ship. Let's say we go buy a ship, and we throw one out there. We all got our money together. Everybody throws in $10 and we buy a ship for 50 grand and we get it cleaned up and sink it out there. Awesome. That ship's going to be there. We don't have any plans of bringing it back and say we're going to remove this. And that's one of the things that doesn't sit well with me, what's happening with this project. There is basically a 20-year lifespan, and the decommissioning is a part that is very, very much overlooked. I've read through these construction operation proposals that are for lease sites out of my local area. One's up in the South Fork Wind, which I've attended 3 meetings there, listening along, seeing what's going on. That's going to link into Montauk. It's happening out to the east of Block Island. Also Vineyard Wind, attending some of those meetings, just kind of listening along, seeing what's going to be coming down the pike here. And what I found in those 2 meetings, or those 2 lease sites in the documentation I've read, is that the decommissioning process is very much overlooked. They use the words likely in there as far as some of the things they're talking about doing. But it basically sounds like they want to build these things, and they really don't want to talk about what the end of life is going to be, because that's going to cost them a lot of money. When you think about it, building a structure out there is eventually going to grow, some fouling, let's say mussels, algae. It's going to start the basics of the food chain. I'm not going to discredit that or disagree with anybody. It's going to talk about the reef effect. But to me, it's when you decommission and you're going to rip these things out, let's say in 20 years, in 25 years. So the first couple of years, I think they're just going to be starting up. It's going to start, not really help fishing, but it's going to start potentially creating something. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, they rip them out. So to me, that's awkward. It scares me. It's very concerning. Another thing that really stands out to me, just if you want to know a couple of my points, if you are going to start reading, is the radical change in bottom, which I mentioned. But it's really, to me, the radical change it's going to do to the habitat. So I'm sure there's a bunch of people on here that are local to Long Beach Island area. I'm sure you've seen, if you haven't, I can tell you that there's been a big change since we got the beach replenishment. Jetties got covered over with sand. Some of them sunk a little bit, have settled down over the years. But right now, Long Beach Island is finally coming back. The beach replenishments took place a while back, years ago. And finally, personally, I see it, that we're starting to see a resurgence of surf fishing action. And what's happening that I see now is that we're starting to see these fish show up along the beaches again. And it's something that a big fear with me is these fish migrate up the coast, and they used to hit these sand lumps that were basically mined for that sand to be pumped on the beach. It wiped out both the essential habitat offshore on the lumps, but it also buried that essential fish habitat on the beaches. And personally, what I see is potentially that same kind of thing happening just a little bit further offshore. So with respect to striped bass, which I'm going to talk to everyone about in a minute, my concerns there and some meetings I've been attending, which is totally has nothing to do with wind, but something I want to mention about striped bass is I think everyone would agree with me. It's one of the primary game species that we all love to target, saltwater anglers in the Northeast. It's a very prized species, near and dear to my heart. I love catch and release fishing for them. Sometimes I also harvest a couple. I'm definitely not a hardcore, catch and release only guy. I definitely try to do my best to responsibly harvest. But something, I'll talk about that maybe later, but something I want to really mention first and foremost here with striped bass and wind is striped bass, in my opinion, really have a great run or a poor run based on the sand eels. And when I say that, I'm mostly talking about my local area. I'm not bringing this out to say the Cape Cod areas, say the canal and the outer beaches and Montauk and Block Island and all the areas up to the north of where I am. I'm really talking about the Central Jersey coast, New Jersey. To me, if we have a really good showing of sand eels, that year is going to be awesome. It's not just striped bass though, but other things also feed on sand eels. Fluke, bluefish, obviously, sea bass, even some of the garbage species, say sea robins. I know sometimes I'm jigging sea bass, I catch a sea robin, they're spitting up sand eels. And obviously, as we get further offshore, there's obviously other pelagic species that just sand eels are candy to them. Tuna, mahi. So in my opinion, sand eels are pretty important. So I did some research. I was looking around sand eels and I was looking, at basically like the breeding grounds for wind, which is the North Sea. And I find that sand eels are somewhat affected, obviously, by the construction and the addition of this new rocky, hard bottom habitat that these lease sites turn into. Something that kind of concerns me with this is as those sand eels move east to west, as they come into the beaches or move offshore, sometimes they burrow down in the sand. They like that soft sand to burrow down. That's what they call home. That's what they kind of puff around and they eat. It's also what they hide in. Something that I kind of found unique when I was reading about sand eels is they don't always come out every single year. And it kind of goes to show why some years we have a better run and some years we have a no-show with sand eels. But with that being said, the lined up section of lease site running north to south, Atlantic Shores is 183,000 square acres. It's either square miles or acres. Please correct me if anybody knows off the top of their head, but I know it's 183,000, either one or the other, acres or miles. It's a very large lease site. I wish I could just toss up a photo of it so you guys could see. If you guys want to see it, give a quick search online. You'll find out more about this. But with that long stretched out lease site along Long Beach Island, it's a fear that I have that these sand eels are not going to move east to west across that. I'm not getting into the EMF topic, which has to do with the cabling. I'm talking about just the scour protection, the addition of all these rock areas around the vertical monopiles. I just have a concern and a fear in my head, and I've asked scientists that I've attended different webinars and things with, and no one really gives me an answer because I don't think they know. I think they might be concerned about it. They don't have the funding for it, but there's kind of bigger fish to fry, we'll say, for lack of better terms. And it's something that bothers me that this failure to know how this large project, this 20-year project, is going to affect the movement of sand eels, which in my opinion then affects the movement of a lot of other things. So let me just kind of bring this full circle as I'm talking about sand eels, striped bass. I kind of touched on beach replenishment and wind turbines. It kind of all comes together here. And what I want to say is basically right now we're allowed to fish for striped bass only within 3 nautical miles. And this is the fundamental piece that I think is very important to understand. There are people that want to open up striped bass fishing outside 3 miles. I'm not one of them. I mean, it would be great to have, but I think it would just slaughter the species. They need to be protected. I'll talk more about striped bass later. But the pieces that I'm concerned about are when these sand eels do not move into our waters and they stay offshore, or let's say the bunkers start liking the areas of these turbines, and now all of a sudden the striped bass move up the coast, and rather than making a westerly jog into the beach, I believe these fish are going to stay further offshore. And I'm going to use this reef effect that I firmly believe will help sea bass and tog, which are 2 great species to target. I love fishing for them. But for me, what I do, my primary species are really striped bass and fluke. I do love tog fish. I do love sea bass fishing, but it's not my primary species. So if you are a wreck fishing angler and you do those species, I'm sure you love those. I'm sure you're going to like these turbines. I'm sure that they'll help you in some ways. But just know that I think they're going to hurt in a number of ways as well. And like I'm saying, I feel that they're going to bring the access offshore and they're going to cut off that access inshore. And what that's going to do basically is at the 3 mile line, it's going to say, sorry, Charlie, this is outside 3. You can't fish for striped bass anymore. And I think it's going to hurt those land-based anglers. I think it's going to hurt those coastal anglers that fish inshore, near shore. And I think it's going to have detrimental effects to the migration patterns that we're used to seeing. If you agree with me, great. If you kind of are following along and sort of have some questions of what I'm talking about, I would love to have somebody fire them at me either now or later. I've written a bunch about some of the meetings I've attended. I've actually asked some questions that I haven't got answers to, but I've still sent more emails to a number of different places, to different Atlantic shores. I've had private meetings with Doug Atlantic Shores, who's one of the head guys there. Also with Ørsted. I actually attended an Ørsted meeting just a few days ago. And the guy who did it was just an absolute joke. No disrespect to him. But we asked him some questions about some things with regards to the water. And he's like, sorry, I'm not a boater. I can't answer those. So basically he jumped on and just wanted to bypass anything that had to do with fishing or the ocean with regards to turbines. And he's more of an engineer. He didn't even know some of these sound mitigation techniques, which are called bubble curtains, which he was clueless on. So it's just funny to me. I attend a meeting, I ask questions, and it feels to me that some of the people they have putting out this information that are, let's say, the public front of the company really aren't informed. They're really not dialed in with what's going on. I don't think they've read a lot of these documents. I've read hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of pages. If anybody wants some documents to read, fishinglbi.com, I've posted a couple blogs on it. I'm not trying to spoon feed good or bad information to anyone. I'm not trying to be a naysayer against wind. I'm not trying to say everyone should stand up for or against it. I think everyone should be informed. Personally, I'm against it with the way it is right now. I would really like to see a 5-year moratorium just to get some studies done to see exactly what's going on. But I'll kind of leave it at that. If anybody wants some more information, check out fishinglbi.com. That's a fishing report blog that I personally write. Also check out Save Our Shorelines NJ. That is a nonprofit group from Ocean City that is basically asking the same questions I am. They are basically against wind. They're mainly a group of people that are environmentalists. They are not really saying that we want to ruin the world with fossil fuels. They're actually radically the opposite. What they're saying, just so you all know, is that the turbines and the fast tracking of the current project and this massive industrialization of our, I'll say, beautiful coastlines and oceans here in the South Jersey area are very, very concerning. And all of these concerns that we raise as public figures, asking questions at meetings, to public figures, they don't have answers back to us. And to me, that's scary. And if you guys are concerned about it or just want to learn more, strongly suggest checking out some information, reading. Unfortunately, you have to do a lot of reading. It's not a quick, one kind of page thing. But just some topics to look for, like I mentioned, was the EMF was one that's kind of been a concern. Some people think or is a little more concerning than others. To me, it's really the migration and it's the construction. I'm not sure if anybody knows how big these things are, but we're talking about 30-foot diameter steel piles, basically a huge piling that's 800 plus feet tall. It's a couple pieces, and they bang in the bottom piece, the foundation first, basically like you're going to drive a piling into the ground. The sound effects that puts off, it's well documented that it scares fish, spooks fish for, the quaking of it spooks the fish for many, many miles. I don't want to sound like a total tree hugger and a mammal lover. Dolphin and whales are very important, but it's been documented to actually make porpoise and whales deaf. I'm not making this stuff up. I can send you the documents to it. It's very, very loud. The decibel levels are off the charts, and that's why I mentioned the bubble curtain thing's the way to mitigate it. But even with bubble curtains, doesn't help. So basically, I'm going to leave the wind part at that. If you guys have more questions about wind, I'd love to answer some questions. I'm not so sure I'll put them in here to this actual chat because I'm seeing a ton of things flying in. I did get some previous, before I jumped on here, some previous messages, a couple of questions that I wanted to touch on. And then I was going to talk a little bit about striped bass. I've been attending some of the meetings with regards to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the public document that they're looking for information on. So the reason I want to mention this is I want to bring people's attention to the fact that striped bass regulations are currently being looked at. They can be changed. They're going to be changed very soon. And they want public input. They want basically everybody from the the once in a, say, season surf guy to the everyday guy to the boat guy to the beach guy and everyone in between, whether you're consider yourself an elite angler or just an once in a while angler, or hey, I go a couple times a year and I fall in between. Whether you're rookie or expert, they want to hear from you. They want to know what you think about the regulations now, and they want to know what you think about the regulations that should happen in the future. I've attended some meetings, both state. There was just one last week within the state. I believe just today there was a Massachusetts one, but I'll dive into striped bass in a little bit. So a couple of these questions that I had, one was Paul. He's on here. I just saw his message come up. So he asked, I'll just shorten the question a little bit. And basically, what lure would I choose, color lure, when the water clarity is poor? So to me, poor water clarity could be like dirty water, tainted water, maybe some sediments turned up, maybe it's windy. In those conditions, I would first and foremost throw like a chartreuse or a yellow, some high visibility colors. I would not ever discount white. White is always right with lures. If there's one lure and one lure and only one lure for me to throw, it's going to be white. But if you can choose, you got a few lures at your disposal. Chartreuse is great for me for dirty water. I've done very good on it. With that being said, I've done good both with chartreuse casting off the beaches, fishing the bays, and also in the boat. So for me, it's universal. It's not just one specific kind of area or zone. With regards to color, and I know Paul's been fishing a lot in the bay and the rivers. To me, when you start seeing that brackish water, not exactly brackish, let's say like salinity wise, say fresh or brackish like that, or versus salty. But when you start getting that like cedar watery color, that brown, when you start getting the flow coming out of the rivers, golds and browns can be very, very effective. So don't overlook that. Black is also something. I don't want to throw a million colors at you because the question was one. So that my answer is chartreuse. But I'm just saying that some backup plans would be that gold, a bronze, and black. Personally, I wish more companies made it. There is, I don't know the color number, but there's a black belly, black back with a hue of purple and a lot of silver on the sides from SP, from the Daiwa SP Minnow. There's a size 13 and there's a size 15. Both of those have been very, very good to me. I actually fish them in the day and I fish those at night. I wish other companies would make a kind of a chrome sided, but also like some addition of black in there too. More so in the belly. There's something about that black belly that's very effective for me. So Paul, thanks for that email, that message before I jumped on here. Another one came from Gonzalo D. He said, do you have a spot on the bayside that you recommend? I'm hoping you're asking about my local area here on Long Beach Island. That's where Fisherman's headquarters is. We're here in Chip Bottom in the middle of Long Beach Island, X63 off the Garden State Parkway. We're talking central New Jersey. As far as one spot, I don't want to give it like one spot and say, do a spot burn. I'm not trying to be the spot burn police. It's just something I've tried to take as a responsibility of my own when I share fishery reports, when I share information with customers, and I try to point customers in the right direction where to go fishing. I don't like to give a specific, hey, go here, go there. Because just like I go to my spot that I want to go to first, sometimes I go there and nothing's happening. Something's wrong. And I have to kind of bounce back to another spot and try out plan B and plan C. So to me, I think I almost give someone these blinders and I close down their mind when I tell them, hey, go here. Because sometimes that spot might have been awesome yesterday or something happened, the wind changed, the current, maybe it's loaded with seaweed or something. So I don't like to kind of tell somebody, hey, go to one spot. But that being said, the causeway bridges, Route 72 causeway bridges, there's a number of spots. There's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 bridges, correct me if I'm wrong. There should be 4 causeway bridges. Every one of them is fishable, now more than ever. They did a new construction project on Route 72, and there's a number of spots to fish there. There's some bayside piers, public piers to fish, some bayside docks, some street ends. Look on Google Earth, scope out some spots. If you're very, very hard-pressed to find a couple areas, I'd be more than happy to meet with you one-on-one at the tackle shop. The whole crew at the shop, the whole team is there and helpful. Everyone fishes. Stop by the shop. We'd love to kind of point in the right direction. I just can't broadcast to the public in a broad range and say, hey, fish this street, and fish this street. because tomorrow, within the next week, there'd be a bunch of people fishing there, and it's going to kind of ruin the fishing that could potentially happen. So hopefully you understand that, hopefully you respect that. There's also some rivers and some bayside spots, say Great Bay, Manahawkin Bay, even up into the Barnegat Bay, many spots. So the question you gave me was pretty broad. I don't know exactly where you're at. I mean, if you're up in the Bayville area or say Toms River area, maybe you're further south in let's say Forked River, Waretown, Barnegat, there's a number of areas up there that you can fish. If you're further south, you want to start, pushing further south some, or maybe you want to go vice versa. You're from the south, you say, hey, I already fished my local area, I want to start creeping north. There's so many different spots to look at. Touch base with us, I'd be glad to share. I might as well mention, because I wrote it down here in my notes, bridges I mentioned, lights, docks, sod banks, outcropping of points, look for some mud flats. They're all very, very valuable. Oh man, there's a lot of questions here. I apologize. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to all of them, but I will definitely keep listening for sure. There's one just came in from MB Hammer 81, says lures or bait for spring run. I would say early spring when it's still cold like now, baits by far, soft baits, specifically bloodworms, are going to be the way to go. As things warm up like it's happening right now, and as the sun's coming out, the days are getting longer, things are warming, fish are becoming more active, lures will work and work more effective. You kind of, at least I saw that transition recently in the past, say, week. Any day now, some other areas are going to start grinding on all cylinders, and things are going to start happening more and more as the season progresses, and that's where that kind of lure fishing is going to take over. But that being said, you can fish bait all the time. Before I jump into striped bass, I just want to mention this: if you're fishing bait and striped bass, you must have circle hooks. So now jumping into Jack's question, he's one that messaged us one over for us. He asked bottom contour to look for when finding bass. I'm just going to go out and say he's assuming striped bass because I don't really do any freshwater fishing. So bottom that I'm looking for with striped bass can vary depending on what's going on. All right. So to me, I look for transitions. When I say that, let's say I'm in the bay. Let's say there's a sod bank and there's a sand beach. I like that transition between the two. Yeah, fish can be stacked all on that sod bank. Fish can be all on the sand bank. But to me, a lot of times those transitions, there'll be a rip. And what you can see on land may be different from what you can't see underwater. That same transition takes place down the bottom. Sometimes there might be a ledge there. It might be sort of like a step off or a larger pocket of water. To me, if you find those transitions, they're going to be successful, much more productive than just random open spots. As far as looking for other spots to fish, you really want to look for structure. You want to look for changes in bottom, whether it's depth or changes in bottom, like I mentioned, from let's say rock to sand or sand to mud or vice versa. There's some areas in our bay that we have some mussel beds, some clam beds, some grass flats, stuff like that. You want to find structure. You want to do some scouting. The springtime is when you want to look for it. That being said, in the ocean here in like where I'm at in the central area, say I fish off of Island Beach State Park a lot and off of Long Beach Island, it's basically open sand bottom. There's some wrecks in there, some patches. There's some softer muddy bottom. There's some harder sand bottom and a transition between the two, some mud and clay in some areas. But for the most part, it's open sand. There's certain areas that I found over the years have been more productive, and I've actually found that they're more or less older clam beds. And I find those areas, there's a couple off Island Beach State Park, there's a couple off LBI that are very, very productive for me. Another thing that's very, very productive for me are the inshore lumps. There's a number of them. Look on some charts, you'll see them. Those areas which have shallower water get light a little bit more, and some stuff grows down there. There's areas that might be right next to them with some deeper bottom. And you kind of have that little bit of a structure, that high to low. A lot of times fish, when they're moving through, will kind of stage up in those areas. I found that early mornings, I look in closer to the beach. And as that sunlight comes up, I tend to move further offshore. It's just somewhat of a trend that I've seen over the years. And I also, am following the bait and any kind of hints that say life gives me, whether I see bait, whether I mark bait, I'm talking boat wise, or maybe I see some birds that can kind of give me some telltale signs. So I'm gonna look through these questions a little bit, and then I'm gonna kind of jump into the striped bass. I'm kind of at the halfway point here if I do a whole hour. So before I jump into striped bass, I'll just kind of look around here. Yeah, as Paul said, the lumps got tore up for replenishment, but are they on the comeback? I think they are. These lumps occurred naturally. I'm hoping that this sand that has been pushed up on the beach, pumped up there, will be eroded, just like we have all seen it. A lot of it's been eroded, and it goes out and has to settle somewhere. Unfortunately, a lot of that is due to the littoral drift is being stacked up down towards Holgate. It's kind of closed off the inlet there. Luckily, they did a little dredge action. I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen here in the next, say this summer, next summer, couple years out, how that inlet and that navigable, say waterway will be affected from that additional sand coming in. How long till the blues come in? That's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, if you want to go on our fishing report, fishinglbi.com, you can do a search and kind of see when the bluefish have shown up over the years. Something that's been told to me a long time ago is when the laughing gulls show up. A lot of times bluefish will show up about a week to 2 weeks after them. Most time, like say 7 to 10 days, 10 to 14 days, something like that. I haven't seen any laughing gulls, but it's not saying that bluefish aren't going to show up any day. To me, I just saw some of the bugs show up. Some of the little insects, whether they're greenheads, mosquitoes, and gnats. And I've always been told growing up here in the area that when they show up, drums show up. So if you're looking for black drum, they should be here any day, if not already. We just had the quote unquote worm moon, which was just this weekend. That's March's full moon. That's kind of a sort of a time point in time that you can kind of gauge when different things are happening. As we transition here into April, April every year is one of the best months for black drum fishing. May is also good. So if you're looking to do that, be on the lookout. It's also, right now is the best time for winter flounder fishing. LT Vids 123 said, what's the best winter flounder bait? I would have to say bloodworms. Personally, when I was growing up, I used to fish for winter flounder a lot more than I do now. Bloodworms with a little piece of corn, a little kernel there, just right out of a small can that you would eat. Pop it on the hook, and it adds a little bit of yellow. It's been good to me. I'm looking here a little bit more, just kind of scrolling back. Some more bluefish questions. I really don't want to dive in too deep here. I might get kind of like behind myself. Matt Lynch says, any word guys catching in Raritan Bay? I can say yes, there's been fish caught in Raritan Bay. That's not our local area, but I do bring my boat up there in the spring. I try to get it up there, and I have a slip starting April 1st, but I'm probably going to get up there, say, sort of like mid-April. Got some issues with some steering, hydraulic steering, and some seal leaks and stuff like that, and trying to find somebody to do it is next to impossible right now. Couple recommendations, kind of requests here for different rods and stuff. I apologize. I can't really get too into that. I think I'm gonna get off topic, talking about tackle and such. I like Dan's comment here, said dark colors are underestimated in stained conditions. I totally agree with you. A lot of people, even on sunny days, they won't fish like a black lure. I think it's only a nighttime thing. I've done very well on black lures, whether it's a swimming plug, whether it's a black popper, they are good to me. I'm not really going to dive too much more because there are a whole lot of questions. I apologize, I can't get down in there, but yeah. But hopefully people have some questions with regard to wind. I know I started going back there. There's a lot of wind questions, and some of them are in depth. Maybe I'll have a full talk of just wind, and we'll talk just about offshore wind, all the things that I know and all the topics that I think are concerning, and maybe some benefits. Maybe talk about the grid a little bit, which is a pretty major thing. Talk about how they're looking to bring in this power from offshore to onshore. Just having a windmill out in the ocean just isn't going to do anything. You need to link it into the grid. Everyone knows that some days it's windy, some days it's not. Perfect examples today. It was blowing really, really strong just about all day. Right now, the sun goes down, the wind totally dropped out. So those wind turbines would have been cranking all day. Guess what? They wouldn't be cranking right now. So how do you account for that? How do you solve that problem, that inconsistency of wind? Just because it's something I'm very passionate about, I got to throw this in there. I asked at multiple meetings, what is the onshore battery solutions that you guys have, or what's your onshore storage solution? Are you using batteries? And after many, many meetings, I get no, 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 and no. Once the state brings up that kind of, we'll say, question, BPU, Board of Public Utility, they know a whole lot more about this than I do. They know about the transmission costs, which are very concerning. They know about the curtailment costs, which are very concerning. They know about the current state of our grid. They know the current state of our energy demands. And all of these come together and you say, all right, well, how's wind going to fit in? And all of a sudden, they're going to come up with these onshore solutions, but no one's seen them yet. I've heard something as outlandish as they're going to use the power when they have it to pump water up into some sort of, say, water tower. And then when they need it, they're going to let the water loose and it's going to turn some kind of turbine and create energy. Basically what I'm saying is hogwash. That was something that one of these very, very, I'll say, fresh public representatives from one of these companies said to just kind of brush one over. But it almost raises more concerns because the people that are talking don't have a clue what they're talking about. That being said, I want to dive a little about striped bass. Kind of flip my page here just so I have some of my notes. I think everyone that's hopefully on this call knows I'm from New Jersey. New Jersey can be looked at from other states as a bunch of fishmongers. We looked for conservational equivalencies. That CE has been kind of thrown around a lot, that New Jersey asked for their equivalency to be different than other states because Maryland's the same way. They did the same thing. New Jersey does not have a commercial striped bass season. Our quota was given to the recreational anglers in the form of a bonus tag years ago. So in New Jersey, striped bass are a game species. Assuming most know that in other areas, striped bass are not a game species. Some states, yes, some states, no. I'm going to see if I can throw a picture up here. Never done this before, but let's just toss this in here, see if I can try. So yeah, here it goes. So hopefully you guys can see this. It's not the best formatting, but basically, if you can see that, you've got commercial on the left and you got recreational sort of in the center. And you have your striped bass removals here. That's basically what was removed from the waters, the harvest and mortality rate. And if anybody's aware of what's going on, they basically, they tax us anglers with a 9% mortality rate, meaning that 9% of the fish that are caught and released die. Even no matter what, it goes against us. Some areas it's much higher, some areas it's much lower, but the average that's been found from different studies that are peer reviewed, that anybody can debate and argue, I'm not getting into that, it's 9%. I'm not saying I agree with that, it's correct or not. It's just that's where we're at in terms of regulations, in terms of management and science. But what I want to show you is top to bottom, those are years. And I just want to bring it up on my computer screen here. So I'm looking at the same thing you guys are looking at. All the way at the top is 1990. And all the way at the bottom, I don't really know if it's visible to you guys, is 2019. And the reason I want to show this and why it's really standing out is everyone says commercial is the problem. And while I agree that if we made striped bass a game species for the entire coast, it would be very, very beneficial for the recreational fishing community, and also other coastal communities, not really just recreational fishing, because we all know that money trickles down. Somebody comes to Long Beach Island to go fishing, they're doing a number of things along the way in terms of preparation and spending on that travel there and back, whether they're just doing a day trip or they're spending a week, or maybe they bought a house in the area and they're a boat, and they're spending money at tackle shops, eateries, what have you. The dollar sign for a striped bass caught and released is much, much more valuable than one that's caught and harvested commercially, and actually recreationally for that matter too. So I want to show this because a lot of people say, oh, commercial guys are the reason. And when you look at this, the commercial quota here, I shouldn't say commercial quota, the commercial harvest is actually very low. I mean, if you go down to those lower numbers here, just all the way at the bottom, 2019, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's 650,000 fish, right? These numbers are numbers of fish. These aren't pounds or tonnage here. We're talking 650,000 fish were commercially harvested in 2019, which is the bottom number. Their release mortality is just shy of 80,000, right? 78,000. And then if you go over one more column over, so now I'm under recreational harvest all the way at the bottom, you've got 2.1 million fish were harvested by recreational anglers, and 2.589, so almost, if you want to round it, 2.6 million fish were released and died based on this 9%. So what that's telling you is that in 2019, the fish that we caught and released, when I say we, I'm talking recreational anglers, we released more fish that died than we caught and harvested. So this goes to kind of explain that when you look at how we can fix things, just see if I can somehow get this photo off of here. When we go to look to fix things, we have to address the mortality amongst other issues. Habitat and environmental, say, degradation is a very, very important thing. We're going to talk about recreational versus commercial. That's a thing. But reducing the commercial harvest does not solve the problem as a whole. And when I say problem, it's a fact that right now the striped bass are overfished. I'm not making this up. No one's making this up. It's the people at the Atlantic Council and the scientists that they depend on for data. Striped bass currently right now, we're below the threshold. The spawning stock is down, and that means it is overfished, and overfishing is occurring. And that if we do not do something right now, we could be in a very, very bad situation. With that said, I have to say it, that there's some people and some organizations, in my opinion, maybe not yours, that are taking this way, way too far to the extreme. There's a group calling for a 10-year moratorium. To me, a 10-year moratorium is a possible tool to bring out when it needs to be, but I don't think it needs to be right now. There's certain areas that might be hurting very bad. There's certain areas that I think are doing very good. Just because one area is doing bad and one area is doing good does not mean that there is no problem or there is a large problem. I just think that there's certain factors that occur in the environment with fisheries. Fish are not consistent. It's actually, if I wish I had that to show, there's actually a chart that shows the young of the year surveys, and actually the spawning stock, when it's at its lowest, sometimes those same years they've had the best recruitment or the best spawns. So if you're looking for some of this data, this information, I would strongly suggest Googling public information document for Amendment 7, and that's from the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. This is all public information. I strongly recommend, if you like striped bass fishing, if you have a passion for it, you have a love for it, and you want to respect the species now and the future, that you check it out. I suggest you read these documents, and I suggest you submit your public comment, just like I did live on the meeting just a few days ago. Just so you know, I was one of two people on the meeting that said I didn't feel that the moratorium was the best idea. I said that responsible practices are very important, but I said that not everyone goes fishing to catch and release. There's some people that go fishing to harvest a fish, and I don't think there's anything wrong with harvesting a fish. But I want to share to the public, and I also shared at that meeting, was that I feel that striped bass should be respected a little bit differently and a little bit more closely. And I think the public education needs to kind of trickle down. Maybe it falls on me being a tackle shop. Maybe it falls on someone like the Fisher magazine or On the Water, the media outlets, the main media outlets here in the Northeast. But I think a lot of responsibility needs to be on the state and also federal level when we talk about Atlantic Council. Atlantic States Commission, the State Council. Those two bodies, I think, need to put more effort into education of what's going on, education into the situation that we're at, and how every individual angler can kind of take action on it. It's our own responsibility to respect the species that we love to fish for. And how can we do that? if it's, let's say 4 guys going fishing and the regulation is you're allowed 4 fish, it might not be the best idea to load up with 4 fish. Now, I'm fine with it if those anglers are not fishing all the time. And let's say they're like, hey, we're only going out once or twice a year. We want to keep our fish for ourselves to harvest, to responsibly use, to eat. Striped bass is good eats. I understand you, hey, you want to share it with your buddy, you want to have a cookout or something, you want to share it with your neighbor. That's awesome. That in my eyes, that's all good and dandy. But I just feel that there is a waste of striped bass, a waste of the species, and not all harvest is used 100%. And I think that people need to take it upon themselves to realize that just because I caught something and I basically, possess it and I took ownership of it, there's a hard decision that needs to be made and say, can I respect this fish a little bit more and respect the potential, and it's really the exponential potential that fish has to create more in terms of reproduction, to support the stock. So in my eyes, that's why I based my charter fishing, I'm a light tackle guide, I based my charter fishing operation around catch and release. I like to tell people before we leave the dock, hey, look, I'm based around catch and release. I'm not the guy to call if you want to fill a cooler with fish. I can give you plenty of guys that do that. That's what they base their business on. If they don't catch fish, they're not happy. I'm not either. I give half off refunds next trip. But to me, it's all about catching fish, but it's all about catching and releasing. It's about the experience. But that being said, I do not believe deep down inside that you can say that and then also say you're not allowed to keep fish. To me, a fishery is only a fishery when you're allowed to harvest. And when I want to say this, responsibly harvest. So don't take this the wrong way. I don't sound like I'm a fishmonger. But I want to say that anglers need to be educated, proper fish handling techniques, keeping a fish wet. You catch a fish, it's been doing battle for quite some time. Maybe it was on heavy tackle, maybe it was on light tackle, maybe it's a small fish, maybe it's a big fish. Every one of those fish deserves the same respect. Slamming it on the deck, just kind of throwing it in the water after it's kind of been, we'll say, exhausted through a long fight, are very important. You might not think about it, but something that's just sort of a tip that someone told me once is, after you fight a fish, bring it in, and once you unhook it, hold your breath while you take a photo, and take a quick photo and see if you can hold your breath and get that fish back in responsibly, quick, but also gently. In that same time it takes you to hold the breath. I got a feeling it's not going to happen. You're probably not going to be able to breathe that long. I'm not saying fish can't breathe while they're out of the water. I'm not saying you're choking them the second you bring them out of the water. I'm not trying to get into the radical extremist side of, fish have feelings and you can't injure them, and, shame on you. Every recreational angler is a fishmonger, because there's lots of groups out there that are saying that and pushing that. But what I find right now is some other organizations that aren't as radical are becoming more radical, and it scares me. When I say that scares me is, the responsible actions of anglers needs to be shared with others to grow that knowledge and to better respect the species, basically. I'll kind of leave it at that. Just looking at my notes here, I mentioned fish handling. Hook removal is very important. If you know you're into fish regularly, a perfect example is bucktailing at Montauk. Something I know a lot of Sharpies up there do is crush a barb. I know when I was introduced to some awesome fishing up there, fishing with bucktails, I too crushed my barb to quickly release fish and have less harm to fish. There's a lot of anglers that fish by themselves at night. They crush their barbs purposely for no other reason than for safety of their own self and also safety of the fish. If you get hooked at night, it's much easier to take a hook that's got its barb crushed than one that doesn't. I think barbless hooks may be something that's coming in the future. It might be something that should be suggested. But I definitely want to mention that the circle hook regulation is in effect. It started 2021. Anybody fishing with bait has to use circle hooks for striped bass, and that's inline circle hooks. And there's very little information out there about it. Yes, On the Water mentioned it. Yes, Fisher Magazine mentioned it. Yes, the state of New Jersey at the Fish and Wildlife mentioned it. I've been publishing it in the Fishing LBI blog many times. But there's not like a big press release that's going out to, say, newspapers, going out to radio, social media initiatives and things like that to tell the general public, not the everyday, Sharpies that are fishing, that are dialed in. It's the average Joe that doesn't fish all the time, that still doesn't know the regulation is not any longer in New Jersey to fish at 28. And there's a lot of people that still think it's that. Now the striped bass circle hook regulation comes in and they're not aware of it. So how do these people get aware? There needs to be signage in tackle shops. There needs to be signage in maybe some popular areas where there's some boats or some popular angular access to the beaches or to the bays or to the waterways. I mentioned this on that call, and that was part of my public comment. Hopefully it rang a bell with them. I just see that there's very little information to the everyday anglers to say, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. You got to, follow these rules. And for everyone that kind of hates the whole circle hook thing, it is what it is. Just it's kind of a call of the times. And in my opinion, I think it's going to be happening for fluke very, very soon. I'm not saying it should happen for fluke. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen for fluke. I'm just saying the same issue that I mentioned about the mortality rate and the issues with the catch and release going back, the dead discard, that same exact issue that's happening with striped bass is happening with fluke, the summer flounder. And in order to reduce that discard, we really don't have many options at our disposal in terms of management to counteract that. So what's going to happen, I feel, very, very soon coming on the pike, is any kind of bait fishing for flounder will probably have circle hooks. Pay attention what's going on in the meetings, stay in the loop, and I think you're going to start hearing this stuff sometime soon. Tyler Davis just mentioned circle hook bucktails. So to me, bucktails are actively fished. They're not static. So static would be setting out a bait and wait and just kind of kicking back. Static fishing is well known, much higher mortality rate. And that's why I mentioned that 9% before with striped bass. Sometimes it's actually higher in studies and sometimes it's lower. Temperature, salinity, style of fishing, among other things, come into effect to make that more or less that rate. The average is 9. I do not know what the average is for flounder, but I'm going to guess it's probably in that ballpark. That being said, actively fishing lures, such as a bucktail, more than likely will not have the circle hook regulation, just like we all fought for with the striped bass in some of these meetings, state meetings. So as far as circle hook bucktails go, I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. If the wrong tree hugger gets on one of these meetings and starts pushing things, they don't understand how effective a bucktail is actively fished at not gut hooking fish. They very rarely gut hook fish, if ever, especially if someone's actively fishing it. It's one thing if it's dead sticked in the rod holder. But to me, that would not reduce mortality very much. The number one way to reduce mortality will be fishing larger hooks, fishing circle hooks for flounder, and also striped bass when statically fishing or fishing in a static manner. So bucktails would be illegal at that point. Yeah, Brian, so it all depends on how they state it. As far as the next question with gulp on a bucktail, okay, that's where things start getting a little squirrely. And that was one of the reasons for one of these public meetings on striped bass, specifically for the definition of what bait is. There was a long debate about it. At the first meeting, I wrote actually a blog on it. They called the title was Around and Round in Circles. 10 to 3 hour meeting that basically went around in circles talking about circle hooks and their lack of definition for bait and their kind of the differences between states. So Maryland would consider gulp bait. New Jersey does not. They just came out with a statement recently that basically calls it aquatic organisms. So basically terrestrial organisms would not be considered bait. Synthetic man-made things like, let's say gulp, also some silicone strips would not be considered bait. So depending on how that plays out, we'll see how that goes for fluke. But that, like I said, I was kind of looking into the future. I wasn't really talking about that now, so don't get confused. For striped bass, you're allowed to fish bucktails. You're allowed to fish bucktails with bait. If you want to learn more about that, there's some stuff I published on the Fishing LBI blog. Go to fishinglbi.com and you can see them there. There's a couple posts I did. Kind of running out of time here, only a few minutes left. So I'm going to be checking off here pretty soon. If there's any questions you guys want, fire them at me here. I got a couple minutes left, but I just want to basically say, if you are passionate about striped bass fishing, pay attention, search up some things, see what you can find in regards to this public information document. Read it top to bottom. There's a number of attachments and different links. You'll find some charts, analyze it. You'll find some easy reading, some a little more clumsy, more scientific reading that might kind of slow you down and kind of get your interest, kind of turned off. But do it for the striped bass, do it for your passion. You'll learn a lot about what's going on, and you'll have a very educated mindset when you go to attend a public meeting, which I suggest everyone does. Just so you're aware, a good attended meeting, these public meetings that they have, last time was a very good attendance. There were 75 people, which to me was pretty pathetic. That being said, like I said, I was one of two people that spoke out against the moratorium. I obviously spoke for the conservation of striped bass. I feel there needs to be new measures taken to better manage striped bass. I'm submitting that all in my public comment. Also, it was a live public comment, but also in writing. But it's just sad that there's only two people, and we basically were somewhat labeled as fishmongers, and a large number of people that were calling for a 10-year moratorium. So if you want to see a 10-year moratorium, by all means, send your letters in, talk to your people, and write a letter to the Atlantic Commission and tell them what you want. I got nothing against that. I personally don't agree with it, like I mentioned. But if you do not want to do it, you want to see that, you want to be able to responsibly harvest, say, a gut hooked fish that you catch, like I do frequently. Every fish I gut hook, if I can't swim it off, I keep it. If it's bleeding really well, really badly, I keep it and harvest it and eat it. But people need to take that responsibility, like I mentioned, to set a fish on the side of the boat or in the surf, get wet, and revive a fish. It's very, very important. So look at a couple of these questions here. I remember the 5-year. Yeah, so for me, a 5-year moratorium would be something that I'd be interested in learning more about. Just so you're aware, I don't want to missay what these groups have said. It's a 10-year moratorium on harvest. So they still want to allow catch and release. The issue, which sort of gets a little gray, which Jim Hutchins from the Fisher magazine went on record asking for clarification on, which was a definition of a moratorium, was that a moratorium you're not allowed to target. There's no intent to target. So these groups are asking for a catch and release allowance within that moratorium, so only a ban on harvest, which has sort of never been done before. So what they're asking for is somewhat unique. They're asking for a new definition of a management, say, tool, which is something that's interesting. I think it's great for debate. It's great for public comment. It's great for people at fishing clubs to talk about and bring up, and maybe eventually something like that can come about. But yeah, it's definitely something that's in the forefront. I strongly suggest everyone that's say coastal or maybe not even coastal that might be concerned about what's going on with the wind turbines and their negative effect. Pay attention. Check out the fishinglbi.com blog I wrote. There's a couple of them there. And also check out Save Our Shorelines NJ. There's a petition on there to slow down this whole wind project, which is happening at light speed right now due to the current administration's support, massive support, and the large influx of international companies kind of taking over our waters. And they're basically going to rip us off, in my opinion, with some very, very expensive power that the ratepayers, I should say energy, that the ratepayers will be put on the hook for many years. So I really appreciate everybody jumping on. Appreciate all the questions. Hopefully I have some free time to jump on one of these and do one in the near future. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.